For today's course, we are going to discuss structure in for C language. Now, before going to structure in depth, first we would like to have a recap on array. In the previous lectures, we have already uh, completed the array, but to go inside the structure, we would like to have one more short recap on array, on what is array. So what is array, guys? So array is a place where you can store multiple variables, right? But those variables should be of same type. So let us consider this is uh, one array, okay, and in this array we can store different variables. So let us put a name for this array. So let us, the name is array1, and this is the syntax for array. And let us also consider that it can store only integer value. So before the name array, you have to write int. So this is array1, which can store only integer data type. So here you can store 1, 2, 3, then 45, like that. But in this array, you cannot store any character value, or you cannot store any variable which is of float type or double type. Okay. Now you can have one more array, right? Let us give the name as array2. Okay. So this one is array2, and let us consider that in this array you can store only character type. Okay, so here you can store a, b, c, like that. Here you can store you can also store 1, 2, 3, 4, but in that case 1, 2, 3, 4 will be considered as symbol. They will not be considered as the integer, they will be considered as character only. Okay, so that means in case of array, you can store multiple variables at one place, but uh, those variables should be of same data type. Now, there may be cases where you would like to store different kind of data types under one name. Okay, as for example, you can consider that you would like to store few info about a student. Now, what are the info associated with the student? Let us consider there are three types of info associated with the student. First is his or her name, and the second one is student ID, and the third one can be the marks obtained by the student. Okay, so for storing the name, you can have a character array. For storing student ID, you can have a variable which can be integer type, and for storing marks, you can have a variable of float type. Okay, so obviously you can have three different variables to store these three different data, but that can become messy. It will be a better approach that if you can keep them under a single name. Okay, because all these informations are related to only one particular student. Now, with the help of structure in C language, you can achieve that. So, how to define structure in C? There is a particular keyword which is known as struct that can be used for creating a structure. Okay. Now we are seeing the syntax of a structure. So here you can see the first one is the keyword, that is the struct. Then you have to give a name, which is the structure name, and inside that structure you can have different type of data types like data type 1, data type 2. So, and for data type 1 there is a variable called mem1, and for data type 2 there is a variable called mem2, and don't forget to give this semicolon after ending this curly brace. Okay, now with this we will check that how we can create a structure for a student that we were discussing. So to create the structure for the student, what we have to do, we have to write the code like this, the struct, the keyword, then give the name of the structure. So let me give the name as the student, struct student. Then you have to start the curly brace and end the curly brace with a semicolon. Inside this curly brace, what we can write, what we need to store the name of the student, right? So for that we need a character array, character name underscore array, okay, and we are keeping a size of 50. Then we need one integer variable for student ID, okay, and then we need one more float variable to store the marks, right? Okay. So here you can see that one structure has been created and the name of that is struct student, and inside that structure you are storing three different kind of data types. First is the character array of size 50, which will store the name of the student, and then you are creating one more variable that is the ID integer type, which will be used for storing the student ID. And finally you have a third variable known as marks, okay, and this is a float type where you can store the marks obtained by the student, right? Okay. Now when you create this structure variable, the structure gets defined but no storage is allocated, okay, but no storage is allocated. Like here when you create this struct student, so one new data type, that is struct student data type, got created, and we call this as user defined data type. The inbuilt data types are integer, character, float, like that. But when the user creates his or her own data type, that time we call it derived user defined data type. And here we have created one user defined data type which is known as struct student. So this is a creation of data type, but it has not been allocated any memory yet. So to allocate to allot memory to this thing, to this data type, you have to create a variable. Like we create variable integer I or something. So here if I want to create this variable, so what we have to write, say struct student, this is the data type, and you can give here a name like stu1, okay. So what happens, the stu1 becomes the variable and the data type is struct student, right? Like we write integer I, then what happens, I is the variable and I is the variable and the data type is of integer. So here stu1 is the variable and the data type is struct student. Integer int is the inbuilt data type and the struct student is user defined or derived data type because it has been defined by the user only. Fine.